Hello and welcome to Devil Wears Data. Today I'm standing next to Rote River in Rotterdam, and I want to tell you a story and connect it to latest research and why I think it matters in today's highly polarized society. Now, Rotterdam, if you may not know, is built because a dam was built on this Rote River, and similarly Amsterdam was built because a dam was built on the Amsterdam River. Rotterdam was set up somewhere around 1270. So Dutch have a long history of regulating water through dikes and through canals. What you see here is actually quite a regulated version of the river, where the water has been regulated through the construction of dikes and so on, and a lot of canals which are going out of this river and feeding back into the river. And of course, then the river merges into the Maas River. Dutch have, over the centuries, actually regulated their water and done enormous amounts of water management in order to reclaim their land. Why I'm telling you this is that in 1672, the Dutch Republic actually faced a huge attack from their neighboring French forces, and Dutch did something which was really audacious. What they did was they opened their floodgates so that the Dutch landscape was covered with seawater. Now, it was a very bold move because what happened was the French could not come forward, and the Dutch ensured that the water wasn't deep enough that they can bring their boats in. So it was shallow that the French had to wade through the water, and ultimately the French forces decided to retreat. But it came at a huge cost because the salt water made all the agricultural land essentially unusable for many years, and that's why it's called the year of the Dutch disaster. Now, why I'm telling you this chapter from the Dutch history is because we are living in a highly politically polarized world. In fact, the political polarization has risen in the last many decades across the globe. And this latest research by Grant and colleagues shows that when there is high affective polarization in democracies, it leads to paralysis in terms of policy decision making. So they specifically look at the CO2 carbon emissions from utility companies, from these power plants, and find that those countries which are dealing with high levels of affective polarization, political polarization, are likely to have higher CO2 emissions. Now, what affective polarization effectively means is that across the political spectrum, you start identifying with your political ideas and ideologies so much that you start hating the people who have the ideas from the other side. So essentially then what you're looking at is you're not hearing the other idea, you are actually looking the other idea as the other party's win or loss. And therefore, a lot of affective polarization effectively ends up maintaining the status quo. Grant et al. Looked at 90 countries, democracies, and over 20,000 power plants and their CO2 emissions. Now, over the years, of course, democracies have been trying to reduce their CO2 emissions, but what they found was, for instance, Poland, which is a highly polarized country, at least at the time they collected the data, versus German economy, which was less polarized, what they found was that Poland was not able to reduce their CO2 emissions because any attempt to reducing that would mean loss of jobs related to coal. while Germany was able to frame this transition, this energy transition, as an opportunity that it will create more jobs in the economy in the renewable sector. So what essentially happens is when there are difficult trade-offs to be made, the economies are unable to do so because there is high affective polarization. There has to be a coordination between two different parties, and that is effectively very difficult to achieve when people hate each other. Now, why I'm telling you this is we've seen a lot of polarization happening in the last few years in India as well. And because of that, we've not been able to take difficult decisions, policy decisions, which are looking at the long-term horizon. Just to give you an example, when the petrol prices were low, India was not able to grow enough in terms of alternative sources of energy. And when this Israel-US war started, now we are left hanging with high energy prices. So political polarization effectively stops governments from making these tough decisions because they tend to maintain status quo, because these tough decisions need coordination, need collective action. People have to come across the spectrum to agree, yes, we will lose something when we make this decision, but then we will gain something as well. And these trade-offs have to be agreed and coordinated. But when affective polarization is really high, any win by the other party is seen as a loss by the first party. And what ends up happening is what is happening in India right now is that everyone is paying the price for these high energy prices. To summarize, Grant et al. Found that where in the democracies where there is high affective polarization, it leads to status quo. Those democracies are not able to reduce their carbon footprint because they cannot explore alternative sources of renewable energy. And because of that, those countries, democracies, emit a lot of carbon dioxide. And that tells us that we need to therefore think of other ideas as simple ideas and not be emotionally attached to our ideas, because if there is high affective polarization, we start seeing the other ideas as a win for the other party and a personal loss to our party. And ultimately, that is hurting all of us. What the Dutch did in 1672 was a hard decision. And it paid off even though they knew the huge cost it came with. Similarly, democracies, in order to function, will have to now account for political polarization in order to take some of these hard policy decisions. As we've seen, the world has grown more polarized in the last 10, 20 years. And in order to function, you, as a democracy, you not just need ideas, you also need to act on those ideas. And as long as there is high affective polarization, this will always come in the way, and the democracies will not be able to grow and take those hard decisions. Thank you so much for joining me on Devil Wears Data. Please, in the comment section, leave a comment if you like this new format, and I will try to do more of this. Thank you so much once again, and I'll see you next time.